Zixthara stood before the massive viewing screen in the Galactic Research Council chambers and tried to hide his excitement. The blue-green planet called Earth rotated slowly below, its swirling white clouds hiding the surface where the newest members of the galactic community lived. 3 tentacles tapped nervously against his research pad as he waited for High Counselor Vexmar to speak. "The humans present us with an interesting puzzle," Vexmar said, his voice echoing through the crystal chamber. "Their initial contact protocols suggested a peaceful species, yet recent reports indicate they have been involved in military actions across several sectors." Zixthara nodded, his large black eyes studying the data streams flowing across his pad. The humans had joined the galactic community only 2 years ago, and their psychological profiles painted them as diplomatic and conflict-averse. They preferred negotiation over warfare, trade over conquest, and cooperation over competition. It seemed like the perfect species to integrate into galactic civilization. "Your assignment is simple," Vexmar continued. "Travel to their colony world, New Hartford, and observe their military forces during the current border dispute with the Vrex Empire. Document their combat behaviors and provide us with a complete analysis of human warfare capabilities." The assignment seemed routine to Zixthara. The Vrex Empire had been testing boundaries again, making small incursions into human space to gauge their response. It was the sort of minor territorial dispute that happened dozens of times each cycle throughout the galaxy. Most species handled such situations with formal challenges, ritualized combat, or diplomatic exchanges that followed established protocols. 2 weeks later, Zixthara found himself on the transport ship heading toward New Hartford. The human colony world sat at the edge of their territory, a mining settlement that processed rare minerals needed for starship construction. According to his briefings, fewer than 50,000 humans lived on the planet, mostly miners and their families with a small military garrison for protection. The transport docked at New Hartford's single spaceport, and Zixthara was met by a tall human in military uniform. The man had short brown hair and friendly blue eyes that seemed to smile even when his mouth stayed serious. "Welcome to New Hartford," the human said, extending his hand in the greeting gesture their species preferred. "I'm Commander Jake Morrison. Earth Defense Force, we're honored to have a representative from the Galactic Research Council observe our operations." Zixthara shook the offered hand, noting how warm human skin felt compared to his own cool flesh. Morrison seemed eager to please, almost nervous about making a good impression on his galactic neighbors. This matched everything Zixthara had read about human psychology. "The Council appreciates your cooperation, Commander Morrison," Zixthara replied in careful galactic standard. "I hope my presence will not interfere with your duties." Morrison laughed, a sound that seemed genuine and relaxed. "Not at all. We want everyone to understand that humans are committed to peaceful coexistence. Having you here to witness how we handle conflicts will help build trust between our species and the rest of the galaxy." The commander led Zixthara through the military compound, introducing him to the soldiers who would be deploying to deal with the Vrex incursion. The base felt more like a civilian settlement than a military installation. Soldiers walked casually between buildings, many without weapons visible. They joked with each other and seemed more like friends than warriors. "This is Sergeant Lisa Carter," Morrison said, stopping beside a woman with short blonde hair who was checking equipment. "She be leading one of our squads during the operation." Carter looked up and smiled warmly. "Pleasure to meet you. I've never met anyone from your species before. Those tentacles must make equipment handling interesting." Zixthara was surprised by the casual friendliness. Most military personnel he had observed from other species maintained strict formality, especially in the presence of foreign observers. These humans seemed almost childlike in their openness. "And this is Corporal Ben Hughes," Morrison continued, gesturing to a young man with red hair who was cleaning what appeared to be a primitive projectile weapon. "Ben's one of our best marksmen," Hughes grinned and waved. "Hope you don't mind if we keep working while we talk. We deploy tomorrow morning, and I like to make sure everything's perfect before we head out." The casual attitude toward the upcoming conflict puzzled Zixthara. These soldiers acted like they were preparing for a routine training exercise rather than actual combat. Their equipment looked outdated compared to standard galactic military technology, and their tactics seemed to rely heavily on individual initiative rather than coordinated unit actions. "How many Vrex forces are you expecting to encounter?" Zixthara asked Morrison as they continued the tour. "Intelligence suggests maybe 200 warriors have established a position at Mining Station 7, Morrison replied. "Standard Vrex raiding party? They're probably testing our response time more than anything else. 200 Vrex warriors, against what appeared to be fewer than 50 human soldiers. By galactic military standards, the humans were severely outnumbered. The Vrex had a reputation as fierce fighters who valued personal combat prowess above all else. Most species would request reinforcements or attempt diplomatic resolution when facing such odds. That evening, Zixthara sat in the base's common area watching the human soldiers relax before their deployment. They played games, shared meals, and talked about their families back on Earth. Private Alex Stone, barely old enough to be considered an adult by human standards, showed pictures of his younger sister to anyone who would look. "She just started university," Stone said proudly. "Studying to be a doctor. Says she wants to help people no matter where they come from." The comment struck Zixthara as oddly prophetic, though he could not have explained why at the time. These humans seemed so innocent, so unprepared for the realities of galactic warfare. He almost felt sorry for them as he prepared his preliminary report for the Council. Tomorrow, he would witness how this peaceful species handled their first real test of military capability. He expected to document a textbook example of inferior tactics meeting superior force, probably resulting in human withdrawal or negotiated settlement. The assignment would provide useful data about integrating primitive species into galactic civilization. If Zixthara had known what he was actually about to witness, he would have requested immediate transport back to Council space. Some knowledge, once gained, could never be forgotten. The transport ship carrying Zixthara and the human soldiers approached Mining Station 7 just before dawn. Through the viewport, the observer could see the industrial complex spread across a rocky plateau, its lights dim in the pre-morning darkness. Somewhere down there, 200 Vrex warriors waited in positions they had seized 3 days earlier. Zixthara expected the humans to follow standard galactic combat protocols. They would announce their presence, issue formal challenges to the Vrex commander, and engage in ritualized warfare that minimized casualties while establishing territorial rights. Every civilized species conducted military operations this way. Commander Morrison gathered his soldiers in the transport's cargo bay for final briefings. 47 humans would be facing an enemy force more than 4 times their size, yet none of them seemed concerned about the odds. They checked their equipment one last time and listened to Morrison's quiet instructions. "Remember, our priority is getting those miners out safely," Morrison said. "The Vrex are holding 17 human civilians in the main processing building. We go in quiet, extract the hostages, then deal with the occupying force." Zixthara waited for Morrison to explain how they would contact the Vrex commander to arrange terms for the civilians' release. Instead, the commander assigned teams to approach the station from 4 different directions simultaneously. There would be no formal announcements, no challenges issued, no opportunity for negotiated settlement. "Sir," Zixthara interrupted carefully, "should you not first attempt diplomatic contact with the Vrex forces?" Morrison looked at him with those strange human eyes that seemed both kind and cold at the same time. "The Vrex don't negotiate for hostages. They consider captured civilians to be property until someone takes them back by force." The transport landed silently in a canyon 2 kilometers from the mining station. Zixthara watched in growing confusion as the human soldiers transformed. Before his eyes, the friendly, casual people he had met the day before disappeared, replaced by something else entirely. They moved differently, spoke in whispers, and their eyes constantly scanned their surroundings. Sergeant Lisa Carter led her squad through the rocky terrain, like she had been born in this landscape. Her soldiers followed in single file, each one placing their feet exactly where she had stepped. They avoided open ground, used shadows for concealment, and communicated through hand signals that seemed as natural as spoken language. How did they learn to move like this? Zixthara whispered to Morrison as they followed Carter's team toward the station. Humans have been hunting for survival for thousands of years, Morrison replied softly. We adapted those skills for warfare. The concept shocked Zixthara. Most galactic species had evolved past their predatory phases millions of years ago. Civilized warfare was conducted according to rules that ensured honor and minimal casualties. These humans were applying primitive hunting instincts to modern combat. Captain Susan Walsh positioned her team at the station's main entrance while Carter's squad circled toward the rear. Zixthara had expected Walsh to be similar to the other friendly humans, but she crouched behind cover with the patience of a natural predator. Her soldiers spread out in positions that provided overlapping fields of fire, while remaining invisible to anyone inside the complex. Phase 1 in 30 seconds, Walsh whispered into her communication device. Zixthara realized he was about to witness something no galactic observer had ever documented. He activated his recording equipment just as the humans began their assault. The attack started so quietly that even Zixthara missed the beginning. 2 Vrex sentries simply disappeared from their posts without making any sound. Then the lights went out throughout the mining complex, plunging everything into darkness that seemed to favor the human attackers through his enhanced vision equipment. Zixthara watched Corporal Ben Hughes eliminate 3 more Vrex guards with his primitive projectile weapon. Each shot was precise and silent, dropping the enemy warriors before they could raise an alarm. Hughes moved to new positions after each shot, never staying in one place long enough to be located. How is this possible? Zixthara muttered, watching humans flow through the complex like liquid death. The Vrex finally realized they were under attack when half their perimeter guards had already been neutralized. Their response followed traditional warrior patterns. They gathered in defensive positions and began searching for enemies to engage in honorable combat. Instead, they found shadows that killed from impossible angles and opponents who refused to stand and fight. Lieutenant Danny Rodriguez led his team into the main processing building where the human civilians were being held. Zixthara followed, expecting to witness a rescue operation that matched galactic standards for hostage recovery. What he saw instead challenged everything he thought he knew about civilized behavior. Rodriguez encountered a wounded Vrex warrior blocking the corridor to the hostage area. The Vrex was clearly dying from injuries sustained in the earlier fighting, his weapon lost somewhere in the darkness. By galactic combat conventions, Rodriguez should have either accepted the warrior's surrender or finished him quickly to end his suffering. Instead, Rodriguez knelt beside the enemy soldier and began treating his wounds with medical supplies from his pack. He worked quickly and efficiently, stopping the bleeding and administering pain medication while his teammates provided security. The Vrex warrior stared in confusion as his enemy saved his life. "Why are you helping me?" The Vrex gasped in broken galactic standard. "Because you're hurt," Rodriguez replied simply, continuing his medical work. When the Vrex's condition stabilized, Rodriguez stood and pointed toward the exit. "Go that way. Your friends are retreating to the landing zone. You can make it if you move now." The wounded warrior struggled to his feet and stumbled away. Rodriguez watched him go, then turned to continue the mission of rescuing human hostages. Zixthara's tentacles trembled as he tried to process what he had witnessed. "He just saved an enemy's life," Zixthara said to Morrison, who had appeared beside him during the exchange. "Danny's a medic," Morrison explained. "He saves lives, that's what he does." But they were trying to kill each other moments ago. Morrison's expression remained calm. The fighting is over for that warrior. Now he's just someone who needs help. The rescue operation concluded within 2 hours. All 17 human civilians were recovered safely, and the Vrex occupation force had been completely routed. The humans had achieved total victory while suffering only minor injuries to 3 of their soldiers. More disturbing to Zixthara was how they had won. The Vrex were experienced warriors, who had conquered dozens of worlds through superior combat skills and unwavering courage. They understood warfare as a test of strength and honor between opposing forces. The humans had defeated them using tactics that seemed to ignore every principle of civilized combat. "You fought like predators," Zixthara observed as the human soldiers gathered for extraction. "We fought like humans," Sergeant Carter corrected him. "We did what was necessary to protect innocent people and end the conflict quickly. But you showed mercy to enemies who would not have shown mercy to you." Private Alex Stone looked up from bandaging a minor cut on his arm. "Just because someone fights you doesn't mean you have to hate them. Those Vrex warriors were doing what their commanders ordered, same as us." The transport lifted off from Mining Station 7, carrying rescued civilians and victorious soldiers who acted like they had completed a routine training exercise. They joked with each other, shared food, and asked the liberated miners about their families. The casual transition from lethal combat to normal humanity unsettled Zixthara more than the fighting itself. As New Hartford grew larger in the viewport, Zixthara reviewed his recordings of the battle. The humans had achieved the impossible. They had fought with devastating effectiveness while maintaining their essential humanity. They killed when necessary and showed mercy when possible, often within minutes of each other. "Commander Morrison," Zixthara said as they prepared to land, "your people are not what they appear to be." Morrison smiled the same friendly smile Zixthara had seen when they first met. "No species is exactly what they appear to be. That's what makes the galaxy interesting." But Zixthara was beginning to suspect that humans were something far more dangerous than interesting. They were a species that could switch between compassion and lethality as easily as changing clothes. And they seemed to consider both responses equally natural. He was starting to understand why his assignment might not be as routine as the Council had suggested. 3 days after the successful rescue at Mining Station 7, Zixthara sat in the base cafeteria trying to understand what he had witnessed. The human soldiers around him ate their meals and talked about ordinary things like family letters and upcoming leave time. None of them acted like warriors who had just completed a flawless military operation against superior numbers. Sergeant First Class Tony Miller sat across from him, methodically eating what humans called scrambled eggs. While reading a message on his personal communication device, Miller had been one of the soldiers who eliminated Vrex guards during the assault, moving through enemy positions like death itself. Now he smiled at whatever he was reading. "Good news from home?" Zixthara asked, genuinely curious about this contradiction. Miller looked up and grinned. "My daughter took her first steps yesterday. My wife sent a video." He turned the device around to show a small human child stumbling across a room into the arms of a woman who looked remarkably like Miller. "She is very young," Zixthara observed. 14 months old? I will be going home on leave next month to spend time with her." Miller's expression softened in a way that seemed impossible for someone Zixthara had watched kill enemy soldiers without hesitation. "Does it not trouble you to leave your family to fight in wars?" Miller set down his eating utensil and considered the question seriously. "I don't fight in wars so I can leave my family. I fight in wars so my family can live in peace. There's a difference." The concept confused Zixthara. Every galactic species he had studied fought for logical reasons like territory, resources, or dominance. The idea of fighting to protect abstract concepts like peace seemed illogical. "Explain this difference to me," Zixthara requested. Miller pushed his food around on his plate while he organized his thoughts. "The Vrex took those miners as hostages because they knew we would come for them. They were counting on us caring more about innocent lives than tactical advantages. In their culture, that makes us weak. But you proved you are not weak." "No, we proved that caring about innocent lives makes us stronger, not weaker. We fought harder and took bigger risks because we knew people were counting on us to bring them home." Private Katie Nelson joined their conversation from the next table. She was small even by human standards, with brown hair pulled back in a practical style. Zixthara had watched her disable 3 Vrex communication systems during the assault, moving through enemy positions with deadly precision. My mom always says that fighting is easy, Nelson added. Any fool can shoot a weapon or throw a punch. The hard part is knowing when to fight and when not to fight. She pulled out her own communication device and showed Zixthara images of an elderly human woman standing in a garden full of colorful flowers. She survived the food riots on Earth 20 years ago, lost her brother and 2 cousins in the fighting. That's when she decided to become a teacher instead of joining the military. Yet you chose military service, Zixthara noted, because she taught me that someone has to be willing to fight so that other people don't have to. She's saving the world by teaching children to think and solve problems peacefully. I'm saving the world by making sure she gets the chance to do it. The conversation was interrupted when Commander Morrison approached their table with a serious expression. We just received new intelligence about Vrex fleet movements. It looks like our little rescue operation got their attention. Morrison activated a holographic display that showed the star system around New Hartford. Red indicators marked the positions of 15 Vrex warships approaching from deep space. The fleet was massive by colonial defense standards, easily capable of overwhelming the small human garrison and claiming the entire system. They're bringing everything they have in this sector, Morrison continued. Intelligence estimates 15,000 warriors aboard those ships. They'll arrive in approximately 18 hours. Zixthara felt his breathing apparatus flutter with anxiety. 15,000 Vrex warriors against fewer than 300 humans was not a battle. It was a massacre waiting to happen. The logical response would be evacuation or immediate surrender to save civilian lives. Will you be evacuating the colony? Zixthara asked. Morrison looked at him with surprise. Evacuate? We have 47,000 civilians on this planet, including families and children. Where exactly would we evacuate them to? Major Frank Cooper, the base's senior tactical officer, joined the group with additional intelligence reports. Cooper was older than most of the soldiers, with gray hair and the kind of calm demeanor that suggested extensive combat experience. The nearest human fleet elements are 6 days away, Cooper reported. We're on our own until they arrive. Then we hold the line, Morrison said simply. Zixthara stared at the humans around him in disbelief. They were discussing a defensive action against impossible odds as if it were a routine training problem. None of them suggested retreat or negotiation, despite facing certain defeat. Commander Morrison, Zixthara said carefully, your force cannot possibly defeat 15,000 Vrex warriors. Basic military mathematics makes victory impossible. Morrison smiled, the same friendly expression he had worn during their first meeting. Military mathematics assumes that all variables are known and predictable. Humans have a habit of introducing unexpected variables into combat equations. What variables could possibly offset such overwhelming numerical superiority? Major Cooper answered the question. The variable is that we're fighting for something worth dying for, and they're fighting for something that's only worth winning. That difference changes everything about how the battle gets fought. The Major activated another display showing the defensive positions around New Hartford civilian areas. The human military engineers had been busy during the 3 days since the mining station rescue, constructing fortifications and obstacle systems that channeled attacking forces into predetermined kill zones. We're not trying to defeat 15,000 warriors in open battle, Cooper explained. We're trying to make attacking this planet cost more than the Vrex are willing to pay. Every warrior they lose taking our positions is one less warrior they can use somewhere else. Private Stone approached the table with fresh intelligence reports. Despite his youth, he had developed a reputation for accurate tactical analysis during his short service time. The Vrex fleet is configured for planetary assault, Stone reported. They're bringing heavy orbital bombardment platforms and enough ground troops to occupy multiple systems. This isn't just about Mining Station 7 anymore. Morrison nodded grimly. They're using our rescue operation as justification for a major expansion into human space. If they take New Hartford, they'll have a forward base for attacking our core colonies. Zixthara finally understood the true scope of what was happening. The minor border dispute he had been sent to observe was escalating into something that could reshape the balance of power in this entire sector of the galaxy. The humans were not just defending a single planet, they were preventing a war that could spread across dozens of systems. "So you will fight knowing you cannot win?" Zixthara asked. Sergeant Miller looked up from the tactical displays with an expression that seemed both sad and determined. "We'll fight because we can't afford to lose. My daughter deserves to grow up in a galaxy where bullies don't get to take whatever they want just because they have bigger fleets. The Vrex respect strength above all other qualities," Major Cooper added. "If we run away without fighting, they'll see humans as weak prey to be hunted. If we fight and make them pay a terrible price for victory, they'll think twice before attacking human colonies again." Private Nelson stood up and began gathering her equipment. "Besides, 8 hours gives us plenty of time to set up some surprises for our visitors. The Vrex might have superior numbers, but they don't know how humans fight when we're protecting our homes." As the soldiers dispersed to begin final preparations for the coming battle, Zixthara remained at the table, trying to process what he had learned. These humans were about to engage in a hopeless battle against overwhelming odds, not because they expected to win, but because the principles they fought for were more important than their individual survival. Every other species in the galaxy would consider such behavior irrational to the point of insanity. Warriors were supposed to preserve their strength for battles they could win, not waste themselves in futile gestures against superior forces. The human willingness to die for abstract ideals defied every principle of rational military doctrine, yet something about their determination filled Zixthara with an emotion he could not identify. These humans were facing certain death with the same casual competence they had shown during their victory at Mining Station 7. They spoke about impossible odds, like they were discussing weather conditions that might affect the picnic dock as he prepared his evening report for the Galactic Research Council. Zixthara realized his assignment was producing data that no one had expected. He was not just observing human military capabilities, he was documenting the emergence of something entirely new in galactic civilization. Tomorrow, he would witness either the destruction of human military power in this sector or something that would force every species in the galaxy to reconsider their assumptions about warfare, courage. The Vrex fleet arrived exactly when their intelligence had predicted. 15 massive warships dropping out of hyperspace like harbingers of doom. Zixthara watched from the command center as the enemy vessels took positions around New Hartford, their weapons arrays powering up for orbital bombardment. Commander Morrison stood calmly beside the tactical displays, studying the enemy formation with the same methodical attention he had given to planning the mining station rescue. His officers provided status reports in quiet voices that betrayed no fear or panic, despite facing odds that should have terrified any rational being. "Fleet Admiral Kexver is requesting communication," the communications officer reported. Morrison nodded. "Put him through." The main display flickered and resolved into the image of a massive Vrex warrior whose scarred face and elaborate armor indicated high rank and extensive combat experience. Kexver's forearms gestured dismissively as he surveyed the human command. "Center. I am Fleet Admiral Kexver of the Vrex Empire," the alien commander announced in heavily accented galactic standard. "You will surrender this world immediately and submit to Imperial occupation. You have 1 hour to evacuate your military forces before we begin planetary bombardment." Morrison stepped forward with the same friendly demeanor he had shown when greeting Zixthara days earlier. "I'm Commander Jake Morrison, Earth Defense Force. I'm afraid we can't accept your terms, Admiral. This world is under human protection, and we intend to keep it that way." Kexver's expression shifted to one of genuine confusion. "Commander Morrison, my fleet carries 15,000 warriors. Your intelligence surely indicates you cannot resist such numbers. Why do you choose death over honorable surrender?" "Because surrender isn't honorable when innocent people are counting on you to protect them," Morrison replied. "We have 47,000 civilians on this planet, including children. They didn't choose this fight, but they deserve someone willing to stand between them and those who would harm them." The Vrex Admiral stared at Morrison for several long seconds before responding. Your species is either incredibly brave or completely insane. I cannot decide which. Maybe we're both, Morrison said with a slight smile. I guess you'll find out. The communication ended and Morrison turned to his officers. All units, prepare for bombardment. Execute Defense Plan Alpha as soon as they start shooting. The first orbital strikes began 30 minutes later. Massive energy beams lanced down from the Vrex fleet, targeting the human defensive positions with devastating precision. Zixthara watched in horror as entire sections of the base disappeared in flashes of superheated plasma that left nothing but smoking craters. The bombardment continued for 2 hours, systematically destroying every visible human installation. On the planet's surface, Zixthara lost count of the explosions after the first 100, each one representing positions where human soldiers had been waiting to defend their world. When the barrage finally ended, the command center's emergency lighting cast everything in an eerie red glow. Half the tactical displays had gone dark, and damage reports flooded in from across the planet. Zixthara counted at least 60 confirmed human casualties in the opening minutes of the attack. Status report, Morrison requested, his voice steady. Despite the destruction around them, Major Cooper consulted his surviving displays. Primary defensive line is gone. Secondary positions took heavy damage but are still operational. Civilian evacuation to the underground shelters is complete. Zixthara watched the human commander process the catastrophic losses without visible emotion. By any rational standard, the orbital bombardment had already decided the battle's outcome. The humans had lost more soldiers in 2 hours than they could afford to lose in an entire campaign. Sir, Corporal Ben Hughes reported from a forward observation post, Vrex ground forces are beginning their descent. I count at least 200 assault shuttles, Morrison nodded. All units implement Defense Plan Beta. Make them pay for every meter of ground they take. The first wave of Vrex warriors landed near the ruins of the human outer perimeter. Zixthara expected the demoralized human survivors to offer token resistance before retreating or surrendering. Instead, he witnessed something that challenged his understanding of sapient behavior. The humans fought like creatures, possessed by supernatural fury. Sergeant Lisa Carter led a squad of 12 soldiers against more than 200 Vrex warriors, using the bombed-out ruins as cover for hit-and-run attacks that picked apart the enemy formation. She moved through the devastation like she had been born to fight in such conditions. Private Katie Nelson, the small woman who had shown Zixthara pictures of her teacher mother, single-handedly held a crucial choke point for 3 hours against overwhelming odds. She used every piece of debris as cover, every shadow as concealment, fighting with a desperate intensity that seemed to burn from her very soul. How are they still fighting? Zixthara asked Morrison as reports of impossible human resistance continued to arrive. Morrison's expression had changed since the bombardment began. The friendly mask was gone, replaced by something primal and terrifying that Zixthara had never seen in any civilized species. They're fighting because their friends are dead, Morrison said quietly. When humans lose people they care about, we don't get discouraged. We get dangerous, the pattern repeated across the battlefield. Every human position that fell took dozens of Vrex warriors with it. The aliens had expected demoralized survivors offering token resistance. Instead, they found enemies who fought with a fury that defied every principle of rational warfare. Lieutenant Danny Rodriguez, the medic who had saved a wounded Vrex warrior during the mining station rescue, led a suicide mission to destroy a Vrex command post. He knew he would not survive the return trip, but his attack disrupted enemy communications for 6 critical hours. Staff Sergeant Chris Allen volunteered for an even more desperate mission. The Vrex fleet's flagship maintained orbital fire support through powerful shield arrays that made it nearly invulnerable. Allen led a team of volunteers and captured Vrex shuttles, using the confusion of battle to approach the flagship and plant explosives on its shield generators. Allen's team won't make it back, Major Cooper reported. The flagship's defenses will destroy them as soon as they complete their mission. Does Alan know this? Zixthara asked. He planned the mission, Morrison replied. He volunteered knowing it was a one-way trip. Zixthara watched the tactical display as Alan's shuttles approached their target. The human sergeant's voice came through the communication system, calm and professional despite his approaching death. Command, this is Alan, beginning final approach to target. Tell my wife I love her and I'm sorry I won't be coming home. The explosions that followed disabled the flagship's shields and ended orbital fire support for the Vrex ground forces. Alan and his volunteers died in the blast, but their sacrifice shifted the battle's momentum in favor of the outnumbered humans across the planet. Similar acts of desperate heroism repeated dozens of times. Humans who should have been broken by losses and impossible odds instead fought with increasing intensity. Every death seemed to make the survivors more dangerous rather than less so. Private Stone, barely old enough to vote in human elections, held an entire Vrex battalion at bay for 2 hours using nothing but determination and an intimate knowledge of local terrain. When his position was finally overrun, the Vrex found 17 enemy Badas around his fighting position. This is not rational behavior, Zixthara observed as casualty reports mounted on both sides. Rationality is overrated, Morrison replied, coordinating defensive positions with the same calm efficiency he had shown during peaceful times. Sometimes the irrational choice is the only choice that lets you live with yourself afterward. By the end of the first day, the impossible was happening. The Vrex assault was stalling against human resistance that should not have existed. Admiral Kexver's overwhelming numerical advantage was being neutralized by defenders who refused to accept defeat even when defeat was mathematically certain. How long can they maintain this level of resistance? Zixthara asked as the humans prepared for another night of desperate fighting. Morrison looked at him with eyes that seemed ancient despite his relatively young age. As long as there are innocent people depending on us to protect them. Humans don't know how to quit when someone else's life depends on our success. The Vrex fleet had expected to complete planetary conquest in less than 12 hours. Instead, they faced an enemy that grew more dangerous with every casualty inflicted upon them. The humans were not just fighting a battle, they were demonstrating something that would terrify every aggressive species in the galaxy. They were showing what happened when you threaten something a human loved enough to die for. The lesson was being written in Vrex blood across the smoking ruins of New Hartford, and Zixthara was beginning to understand that he was witnessing the birth of a legend that would reshape galactic civilization. The humans were losing the battle by every conventional measure, but they were winning something far more important. They were proving that some things were worth any sacrifice to defend, and that knowledge would make them the most feared and respected species in known space. Dawn of the second day brought something Zixthara had thought impossible. The humans were still fighting, and the Vrex assault had not only stalled but begun to retreat from several key positions. What should have been a completed conquest had become a nightmare of attrition that Admiral Kexver's forces could not sustain. The tactical displays in the human command center showed a battlefield that defied every principle of military science. Red indicators marked Vrex positions that should have been advancing steadily toward final victory. Instead, many of those indicators were retreating or had disappeared entirely, eliminated by human defenders who refused to acknowledge mathematical impossibility. Commander Morrison stood before the main display like a statue carved from stone and determination. His uniform was torn and stained with smoke from the bombardment, but his voice remained steady as he coordinated the impossible defense. Sector 7 reports successful counterattack, Major Cooper announced. Captain Walsh's team retook the water treatment facility and is holding against Vrex reinforcements. Zixthara struggled to process this information. Captain Susan Walsh had been leading 23 soldiers against more than 300 Vrex warriors when he last checked her position. Basic mathematics indicated her force should have been eliminated hours ago. How many casualties? Morrison asked. 11 wounded, none killed. They captured 47 Vrex prisoners and disabled 2 enemy armored vehicles. The impossible continued to happen throughout the morning. Lieutenant Rodriguez, who should have died in his suicide mission the previous day, had instead survived. To establish a forward aid station where he treated wounded soldiers from both sides with equal dedication. His position had become an unofficial neutral zone where even Vrex warriors came seeking medical assistance. "This cannot be accurate," Zixthara said, reviewing the battle reports. "These numbers suggest the humans are achieving victory despite overwhelming disadvantage." Morrison looked at him with an expression that mixed exhaustion with something approaching satisfaction. "The numbers are accurate. What they don't show is why we're winning." "Explain this to me," Zixthara requested. "By every standard of military analysis, your forces should have been eliminated yesterday." Major Cooper joined their conversation, his face bearing fresh scars from the previous day's fighting. The Vrex made a fundamental error in their tactical assumptions. They planned this assault expecting to fight soldiers defending territory. "Are you not soldiers defending territory?" "No," Morrison said simply. "We're parents defending our children, neighbors protecting our communities, and friends standing up for each other. Territory is just dirt and rocks. What we're defending is worth infinitely more than that." The distinction seemed subtle to Zixthara, but its effects on the battlefield were undeniable. Human soldiers fought with an intensity that went beyond professional competence or species survival instincts. They fought like every enemy casualty was a personal victory, and every friendly loss was a sacred trust that demanded vengeance. Sergeant First Class Tony Miller, the man who had shown Zixthara pictures of his daughter taking first steps, coordinated a defense that had eliminated an entire Vrex battalion during the night. His radio reports came through the command center speakers with the calm professionalism of someone discussing routine maintenance. "Command, this is Miller. We've cleared the industrial sector and established defensive positions around the civilian shelters, requesting medical support for aiding wounded Vrex prisoners. Medical support for enemy prisoners?" Zixthara asked in confusion. Morrison nodded to the communications officer, who dispatched medics to Miller's position. "The fighting is over for those warriors. Now they're just people who need help." The same pattern repeated across the battlefield. Human soldiers who fought with lethal efficiency against armed enemies immediately became caregivers when those enemies were wounded or captured. They provided food, medical treatment, and protection to Vrex prisoners with the same dedication they showed to their own wounded. Private Katie Nelson, who had held her impossible choke point through the previous day's assault, now ran supply missions to forward positions while caring for a wounded Vrex warrior she had captured. The alien had sustained serious injuries during the fighting, and Nelson carried him to safety despite his attempts to continue fighting. "Why do you save those who tried to kill you?" The confused Vrex asked Nelson in broken galactic standard. "Because you're hurt and I can help," Nelson replied, applying medical supplies to his wounds. "The fighting part is over." This behavior mystified Zixthara as much as it did the Vrex prisoners. Every other species in the galaxy treated captured enemies as resources to be exploited or problems to be managed. Humans treated them as individuals deserving compassion and respect. The afternoon brought news that changed everything about the tactical situation. Admiral Kexver's flagship, still operating without shields thanks to Staff Sergeant Allen's sacrifice, had sustained critical damage from human ground-based weapons. The massive vessel was listing badly and losing altitude. "Sir," the communications officer reported, "Admiral Kexver is requesting another parley." Morrison straightened his torn uniform and activated the communication link. The Vrex admiral who appeared on screen looked nothing like the confident conqueror from the previous day. His elaborate armor was scorched and damaged, and his expression showed something Zixthara had never seen in a Vrex warrior: doubt. "Commander Morrison," Kexver began, his voice lacking its previous arrogance, "my tactical advisors inform me that continued assault will result in unacceptable casualties to my forces." "Are you requesting terms for withdrawal?" Morrison asked. "I am requesting to understand how this is possible. My warriors are experienced fighters who have conquered dozens of worlds. Your resistance should have collapsed within hours of our arrival. Morrison smiled, but it was not the friendly expression Zixtara remembered from their first meeting. This smile held the weight of impossible victory and terrible knowledge. "Admiral, your warriors are fighting for conquest and glory. Mine are fighting for love and hope. That makes all the difference in the galaxy." Kexver stared at Morrison for several seconds before responding. "Love and hope are not military advantages. They do not stop plasma bolts or deflect explosive charges. No, but they make people willing to run through plasma bolts and explosive charges to protect what matters to them. Your warriors fight until the odds turn against them. Mine fight until there's nothing left to protect or no one left to do the protecting." The truth of Morrison's words was written across the battlefield in ways that no military academy could have predicted. Human soldiers had achieved impossible victories not through superior technology or tactics, but through superior motivation. They fought like every battle was the last chance to save everything they cared about. Lieutenant Colonel Janet Murphy, the senior officer who had coordinated the overall defense, joined the communication with Admiral Kexver. Murphy was older than Morrison, with gray hair and the kind of calm authority that came from decades of military service. "Admiral," Murphy said, "we're prepared to allow your forces to withdraw with their wounded and captured personnel. We'll provide safe passage to the edge of our system and guarantee that no human vessels will pursue your fleet." "In exchange for what concessions?" Kexver asked suspiciously. "No concessions. We don't want to conquer your territory or dominate your people. We just want you to leave our families alone." The concept seemed to confuse the Vrex Admiral as much as it had confused Zixtara. Military victories were supposed to lead to territorial gains, resource extraction, or political dominance. The humans were offering to let their defeated enemies depart without punishment or reparations. "This is not how warfare is conducted," Kexver protested. "This is how humans conduct warfare," Morrison replied. "We fight to end conflicts, not to perpetuate them. We want peace more than we want victory." The Vrex fleet began its withdrawal. 6 hours later, carrying wounded warriors and captured equipment back toward their home territory. Admiral Kexver's flagship limped away from New Hartford, surrounded by vessels that had expected easy conquest and found instead the most difficult battle of their military careers as the enemy ships disappeared into hyperspace. The human defenders emerged from their positions to begin caring for casualties and repairing damage. They moved with the same casual competence they had shown in victory at Mining Station 7, as if achieving impossible military success was routine behavior. Zixtara walked among the human soldiers as they worked, trying to understand what he had witnessed. These people had accomplished something that would be discussed in military academies for generations to come. They had defeated superior numbers through nothing more than determination and love for those they protected. "Commander Morrison," Zixtara said as the human leader supervised casualty evacuation, "your species has demonstrated capabilities that will change how every civilization views warfare." Morrison looked tired but satisfied as he watched his soldiers carry wounded comrades and former enemies toward medical facilities with equal care. "All we demonstrated is that some things are worth fighting for, and that people will do impossible things when they're protecting what they love." 6 weeks after the Battle of New Hartford, Zixtara stood once again before the Galactic Research Council chambers, but everything had changed. The blue-green planet below looked the same, but his understanding of the species living on its surface had been fundamentally altered by what he had witnessed. High Counselor Vexmar activated the recording systems as representatives from dozens of galactic civilizations took their positions around the Crystal Amphitheater. Word of the human victory over Admiral Kexver's fleet had spread throughout known space, creating a level of interest in Zixtara's report that exceeded anything in Council history. "Observer Zixtara," Vexmar began formally, "present your findings regarding human military capabilities and combat behavior." Zixtara activated his data displays and took a breath that seemed to carry the weight of cosmic responsibility. "Honored counselors, I must begin with a correction to our initial assessment. Humans are not the peaceful, diplomatic species we believed them to be. Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembled representatives. Several species had already begun adjusting their diplomatic relations with humanity based on preliminary reports of the new Hartford battle. They are something far more complex and dangerous than a simple warrior race, Zixthara continued. Humans possess the capacity for both infinite compassion and absolute destruction, often exercising both qualities simultaneously during the same conflict. The first data stream showed tactical recordings from the Mining Station 7 rescue operation. Council members watched human soldiers eliminate enemy guards with lethal precision, then immediately provide medical aid to wounded enemies without being ordered to do so. Observe their behavior during this initial engagement, Zixthara narrated. Lieutenant Danny Rodriguez treats the wounds of a Vrex warrior who had been trying to kill him moments earlier. When questioned about this action, Rodriguez stated that the warrior was hurt and he could help. Ambassador Thexler of the Rigelian Trade Federation interrupted with obvious skepticism. This behavior suggests psychological instability rather than tactical sophistication. No rational species provides aid to active enemies. That assumption led to Admiral Kexver's defeat, Zixthara replied, activating the next series of recordings. The Vrex planned their assault expecting to face rational opponents who would surrender when faced with overwhelming odds. The displays showed excerpts from the Battle of New Hartford, focusing on incidents that defied galactic military doctrine. Private Katie Nelson holding her position against impossible odds while caring for captured enemies. Staff Sergeant Chris Allen volunteering for a suicide mission to protect people he had never met. Commander Morrison offering safe passage to defeated enemies who had tried to destroy his world. These actions appear irrational until you understand the underlying human psychology, Zixthara explained. Humans do not fight for conquest, territory, or dominance. They fight for abstract concepts they call love, hope, and justice. Representative Quinder of the Andromedan Empire challenged this assessment. Abstract concepts cannot provide tactical advantages or strategic resources. How do such motivations translate into military effectiveness? Zixthara displayed casualty figures from the New Hartford battle. 300 human defenders inflicted over 4,000 casualties on a Vrex invasion force while losing fewer than 200 of their own soldiers. They achieved this through tactics that prioritize protecting innocent life over military efficiency. The numbers caused an immediate stir among the council members. The Vrex Empire was known throughout the galaxy for producing some of the finest warriors in known space. Their defeat by vastly inferior numbers challenged fundamental assumptions about military power. Furthermore, Zixthara continued, the humans accomplished this victory while simultaneously providing medical care, food, and protection to over 600 Vrex prisoners. They fought with devastating effectiveness while maintaining their essential humanity. High Counselor Vexmar leaned forward with obvious concern. Are you suggesting that human military capabilities exceed our current threat assessments? I am suggesting that our threat assessment categories are inadequate for evaluating human capabilities, Zixthara replied. They do not fight like any species we have previously encountered. The next data stream showed post-battle footage of human soldiers working alongside former Vrex enemies to repair damage and care for casualties. Commander Morrison and Admiral Kexver stood together discussing prisoner exchanges and medical supplies, their earlier conflict seemingly forgotten. Notice how quickly the humans transition from lethal combat to cooperative behavior, Zixthara pointed out. They are capable of switching between modes of operation that other species consider mutually exclusive. Ambassador Zethmos of the crystalline hegemony raised a fundamental question. What prevents humans from using these capabilities for aggressive expansion? If they can defeat superior numbers so easily, what stops them from conquering neighboring systems? Zixthara had anticipated this concern. Their psychological profile prevents aggressive expansion because they derive no satisfaction from conquest or domination. Humans fight to protect, not to possess. They seek to end conflicts quickly rather than prolonging them for strategic advantage. But surely they must understand the military applications of their success at New Hartford, pressed Representative Elixahan of the Centaurian Alliance. They understand the implications perfectly, Zixtara confirmed. Major Frank Cooper explained. To me, that humans study their enemies not to find weaknesses to exploit, but to understand their motivations and find ways to resolve conflicts without fighting. This revelation prompted heated discussion among the council members. The concept of studying enemies to avoid fighting them contradicted every established principle of military intelligence gathering. When forced to fight, Zixtara continued, over the debate, humans do so with devastating effectiveness precisely because they understand the cost of prolonged warfare. They seek to end conflicts as quickly as possible to minimize suffering on all sides. The final section of his report dealt with the most disturbing aspect of human psychology from a galactic perspective. Humans will fight any war against any odds to protect those who cannot protect themselves. This makes them unpredictable in ways that could destabilize existing power structures throughout known space. Explain this assessment, Vexmar requested. Every other species in the galaxy fights for rational reasons, territory, resources, trade advantages, or political dominance. Humans fight for principles that exist only in their minds: freedom, justice, peace, and the protection of innocent life. This makes their behavior impossible to predict using conventional diplomatic models. Zixtara activated his final display, showing strategic projections based on human military performance at New Hartford. If humans decide that another species is threatening innocent life somewhere in the galaxy, they will intervene regardless of political considerations, treaty obligations, or military odds. Are you suggesting humans represent a threat to galactic stability? Ambassador Wexler asked. I am suggesting they represent a completely new factor in galactic politics, Zixtara replied. They are the first species we have encountered that fights for ideals rather than interests. This makes them simultaneously the most trustworthy and most dangerous civilization in known space. The council chamber fell silent as members absorbed the implications of this assessment. A species that fought for abstract principles rather than concrete gains could not be controlled through traditional diplomatic or military pressure. What recommendations do you propose for managing human integration into galactic civilization? Vexmar asked. Zixtara had spent weeks considering this question. We must never give humans a reason to view us as threats to innocent life. Their response to such threats exceeds all rational military projections. And if conflict becomes unavoidable? Based on my observations, any species that provokes humans into full-scale warfare will face an enemy that fights with the fury of parents protecting their children. They will sacrifice everything to achieve victory, then immediately begin helping their defeated enemies recover from the conflict. The formal session continued for several more hours as council members questioned every aspect of Zixtara's findings. When it finally concluded, the observer was exhausted but satisfied that he had accurately conveyed the reality of human nature. Later, in his private quarters, Zixtara composed the personal addendum that would become legendary among xenological researchers throughout the galaxy. I was sent to observe how humans fight, he wrote. I learned instead why they fight. The difference is what makes them both the greatest hope and the greatest threat our galaxy has ever known. They fight not from hatred or greed, but from love and hope for a better future. When humans say they come in peace, they mean it completely. When they say they will defend peace, they mean that equally completely. The galaxy is safer because they mean both things at the same time. My final recommendation to the Council is simple: never give humans a reason to fight us. Not because we would lose, though we certainly would, but because they would win with such devastating compassion that we would spend generations trying to understand how enemies could.